Welcome to another episode of Data Skeptic Animal Intelligence. Today on the show we're doing a further exploration of the impact of computer vision on this field, specifically the study of lemurs and their social interactions. We discuss state-of-the-art, leveraging well-known algorithms, custom algorithms, and a few other great details. Let's get straight away into the interview.
I'm Richard Vogg. I'm a PhD student in the group of Alex Ecker at the University of Göttingen in Germany. We're a group that is doing computer science. We're part of a collaborative research center where we're working with groups that study primate behavior in the wild. We're using artificial intelligence to analyze videos of monkeys and lemurs and try to analyze their behavior. So I'm now in the fourth year in my PhD, and when I started, also the project started, so that's kind of nice that I was there since the beginning. I do train the deep learning models that we're using. I'm not alone, of course. There are other PhD students and also postdocs who are also working on artificial intelligence models that can help us to analyze the behavior. But I'm most focused on the collaboration with a group that has a field station in Madagascar, where they are studying the behavior of red-fronted lemurs and also other lemurs. This is kind of my main focus.
And what does it mean to study them in the wild?
I had the opportunity already twice to go to Madagascar and see it for myself, which is amazing for a computer scientist. Of course, I'm not trained to study behavior, so that is what the biologists are doing. In this case, we are putting food boxes or feeding boxes on the ground and studying how they learn from each other. So that is social learning. That is also something that we humans are doing, that basically if there is a difficult task and there are maybe several options how to solve that task, we don't rely on ourselves, but we also look at others who are maybe more successful or have different ideas. And by studying this and counting, for example, who's using which technique, who's looking at each other, they are trying to infer how these lemurs learn and especially how these lemurs learn socially.
Well, maybe a less social species, there'd be an individual who would find the food box and hide it from their peers because they don't want to collaborate. What's the typical behavior of a lemur?
Yeah, that's a good idea, but we made the boxes quite heavy so so that this doesn't happen. They do from time to time scare away the others, although they are not violent. They are just, I don't know, they're some sort of natural. They know when to approach a box and when not. That is also, like, I think the biologists could talk much more about these types of behavior, but they know how to defend the boxes if they want to be alone there.
What does data collection look like?
So in this particular case, we have 8 cameras that film the lemur experiments from different angles. So we always put a camera that is really nearby the boxes, so filming what exactly is happening at the entrance of the box. But we also have cameras that film it from a more wide angle so that we see also lemurs that maybe are sitting in the periphery and looking at others. And we also have cameras that film from the top. Anything that happens in the radius of this experiment is filmed. Basically the raw data that I'm working with is video data, the data collection, via GoPros and other cameras that we use.
Well, one of the things you point out in your paper, Computer Vision for Primate Behavior Analysis in the Wild, is that computer vision has made some major advancements in the last roughly 10 years. Have those advancements driven the research groups to put those cameras in, knowing that they'd be useful, or were the cameras there for study before the computer vision revolution?
So I know that they also, the biologists also used cameras before we collaborated. So to film and also to manually score what is happening there. However, I think now that we have these opportunities with computer vision techniques, there is the need to have, like, for example, more cameras to that there's no occlusion, that we can see everything that is happening so that the model can do this for us. And it also opens, of course, the possibility to have many more experiments. So now we're doing like so many experiments that a person could not anymore score this manually. So at some point we need these models really to work well and reliably enough so that all those videos can be analyzed.
And prior to the involvement of computer vision and AI, what was the, I guess, manual task like?
So I think it's still being done a lot. That basically there is a labeling software where you can upload your video, and then you can go through the video and you say, from in this moment, a look is starting. So, for example, individual 1 is looking at individual 2, and then you go to the end of this interaction and you say, here it ends. And these type of manual labeling softwares, of course, help you with this process so that you don't have to do it manually in your Excel sheet, but still you have to go through this video probably many times until you detect all those interactions and you annotate all those interactions. So if you have, I don't know, a 1 hour video, it probably takes, depending on what interactions and how many individuals there are, but 3 or 4 times the time of the video to analyze this manually.
And when you think about the current state, I guess we're maybe in transition. To what degree have we transitioned into an automated approach?
I think in the last years we have seen some successful applications of computer vision methods for non-human primate behavior analysis. I think we've seen it for multi-object tracking, for individual identification, but it was always for a specific species or for a specific application. For example, if we compare it to the lab setting where we have like a very mature pathway using key points as an intermediate representation, then inferring the behavior from these key points that are usually filmed with fixed cameras and the animals are usually not moving outside of the frame. We are still kind of behind in the wild because there are so many more challenges. There's, for example, the challenge that the animals can move wherever they want, whenever they want. There's background, there's occlusion, and sometimes even not only the monkeys move, but also the cameras move. So what we are trying to see is, like, from these first successful applications that have already been done in the wild, how can we also go towards a more mature path to do behavioral analysis in the wild?
Well, there's a project out there called YOLO that I'm sure you're familiar with, but for listeners who might not be, it's a rather impressive demonstration of computer vision in real time. You can see maybe a city scene with bicycles and buses and policemen, and it'll bound box recognize, maybe even a dozen or more objects in one frame all at once. And it could give the observer the impression that computer vision is kind of solved. How do these off-the-shelf tools work in the problem space you're in?
Yes, definitely. We have to make use of all those great tools of computer vision that are out there. I think YOLO is a very good example for an object detector that is very versatile. It has seen a lot of objects, it has been trained to detect a lot of objects, and it is constantly developed to be better, faster. But of course, yeah, if you want to apply it to primates, you have to see how well that works, depending on how easy the scene is. I'm quite confident that YOLO is a good starting point and that it would already be able to detect a lot of monkeys, a lot of lemurs. If the lemurs are in a not standard position or something like that, when they are with the back towards you or when they are jumping and a little bit blurred, it might be that YOLO sees something that it has not seen before, and it might lose the detection for a bit in the video. So, for example, if there's a lemur sitting, it will detect it, and when it jumps, it will lose it for a few frames and it will redetect it. But these few seconds might already be like crucial when it comes to tracking, that it might say, oh, is this even the same lemur that we saw before? And so YOLO is a good starting point. YOLO is a powerful tool, but alone it won't solve all the questions that we have for behavioral detections.
Thanks to our newest sponsor, math.fashion. Yes, that is a real URL. Visit math.fashion and check out their line of mathematics-themed t-shirts. They sent me the Klein Bottle shirt, which is pretty stylish. I've gotten a few compliments about it, and each one is the opportunity to start a long conversation about two-dimensional manifolds. Get more math in your life, specifically on your body. Visit math.fashion. You'd mentioned the possibility of incorporating multiple cameras. Well, I guess you have them now, but maybe even adding more in the future. Having these multiple angles, is that something that is easy to plug into the current technology, or do you have to, develop new algorithms that can support that?
We definitely want to use these different camera angles to understand the scene as it is happening. One problem that we have in the wild is that we don't have a lot of time to set up those experiments, and every day we are setting up at a different location. So these cameras are not calibrated. That is something, if you have a lab, you also put your cameras in the, I don't know, in the angles, the corners of your lab, and then they are always at the same position and they are calibrated, and you can easily, for example, triangulate where the animals are. This is not the case for us, but again, computer vision is doing a lot of progress also on understanding a scene from a 2D image, understanding, for example, the depth of how far these objects are away, or also to use uncalibrated cameras to understand what is kind of happening in the scene. A little bit, I mean, and this is something that is not new. It is getting better and better. But for example, when you think of these old ways of doing panorama pictures on your with your camera, that you basically take a picture and then your camera tells you where to move, and then it stitches it together, even though it only sees a part of that image based on some key points that it has detected. And this is also something that can be used, for example, for combining those several cameras perspectives, even though the cameras are not calibrated and don't know where the other cameras are.
Well, one of the maybe obvious services that computer vision can offer you is animal detection, drawing that bounded box around where an animal is in a scene. What are some of the other outputs that you hope an algorithm can give you?
Yes, object detection is the starting point for almost anything that we're trying to do, because we're thinking about individualized behavior. So we want to know what a certain individual or several individuals are doing. Object detection is maybe also the most known output. However, we need more if we want to study behavior. So first of all, we have videos, so we need multi-object tracking. So we need not only detections on individual frames, but we also need to know that the monkey that we detected on the first frame is the same that we also detect on the third frame. That is multi-object tracking, kind of stitching those detections together. Another important point is individual identification. We don't only want to know, okay, that there is a monkey, but if they have names or if they are identifiable, we want to know which monkey is doing what. And individual identification, there are two important settings. So one is closed set identification, where basically all the individuals are known. So for example, you have a group of 10 monkeys, they all have names, and then you just train a model and you say, learn to detect these 10 individuals, and you're done. But there's also something called open set identification. That is, if you don't know all your individuals, as it could be in a forest, that sometimes individuals that you have never seen before appear, but you still want to say, oh, this is the same individual that I saw before, even though I don't know the name. And that is a little bit more tricky, and that is open set identification. But that is also something that there has been a lot of research in on the computer vision side, and that can be very valuable for doing individual identification. And of course, lastly, action understanding and interaction understanding are kind of the final part that we need to do behavioral analysis. And why do I distinguish them? Action understanding is what I say is happening within one box or within the whole video. When we have one monkey, what is this monkey doing? And interaction is what is happening between either two monkeys. So, for example, a look. Like if one monkey is looking at another monkey, that is always an interaction if they are grooming. Or also what is happening between a monkey and any other object that is of interest. So in our case, for example, when we talk about the lemurs, then our feeding boxes are often targets of interactions that are of interest for us. So I think if we can solve all those four tasks, then we can do quite a lot in analysis of behavior.
Well, if I went to Madagascar and I went to go visit the red-fronted lemurs and there was a group of 10 individuals...
You should.
Yeah. I don't know that and I guess this is my human bias coming through, I don't know that I could tell them apart very well. How long does it take a graduate student to develop that skill?
I'm not sure. Like I'm definitely not an expert. So for me, it took a lot of time. Even yeah, I think even now I can't. I still can't do it. But one thing that is a little bit helpful is that most of those they have a color. So they have a small tag that has a color, and that helps to identify them. So you can just look up in a list. Okay, what is the one with the, I don't know, the green triangle, and then you know the name. But for example, our other collaborators in Thailand, they don't have that luck. They have like I think over 200 macaques, and they are not tagged or anything. So there, the students really have to go and have to learn them by heart. And I think I don't know how long it takes. I would guess weeks or months, because you have so many. They probably look quite alike in the beginning, and I can't imagine how long it takes, but I'm sure it's a difficult task.
And how difficult is it for an algorithm?
That depends. I think for the lemurs, it is not so difficult because we have these tags and we have a tracking algorithm that is already working. So, what we only have to do is we have to follow them until we see the tag. And then we can say, okay, now the algorithm is really confident. And in all those cases where, I don't know, where we only see the back of the lemur, we say, oh, yeah, the algorithm doesn't output anything very confident. But in the moment where we can see that tag, we are really, really confident. And then we can propagate that name that we detect in this particular moment throughout the whole track. But that is, of course, if we have these tags. For macaques, I think it is a very, very challenging thing to do. And then, of course, there are different philosophies how you can do that. You can do face detection. Then you again have to wait until you see the face. You can do full body detection. And there are even some approaches where you don't detect anything at all, but you just look at the frame and the model tries to learn who is in that frame. And all this, of course, happens through labels. So you need a lot of images from either the face or from the whole body or like complete images, and you need to say who is in that image, and you need hundreds of them probably until your model learns to reliably detect them. And probably even if they are in a, I don't know, in front of a different background or anything, it will still be difficult for the model. So you need a lot of training material. You have to make the model really robust in order to be reliable.
Well, if it was hundreds of pictures of cats, I would be sure you have no problem with that. To what degree is sparse data a problem for you?
Yeah, labeling is definitely an important point that we also focus on in our paper. We have a lot of data, but we don't have a lot of labels. You can, of course, start and say, okay, I'm going through all those videos and I'm going to stop at each of these frames and I'm going to label who is in that frame. But then you again spend so many hours that you're almost maybe back to doing like manual behavioral annotations better than training those models. What we are also focusing very much, and we have a full chapter on that, is effort efficient learning. That means how can we make most of our large amounts of data but few labels? And there are also quite a few ideas in the computer vision community. So one would be, for example, self-supervised learning, where you don't have any labels at all, but you still use all the data that you have to train a model that has some sort of an intuition of what is happening in that scene. If I don't have any labels, I only have the image or the video. I take the video and I mask most parts of the scene. So that means that sometimes you have a monkey, but the head is masked away, so it's just black pixels. What the model has to learn, it has to learn to restore the original image. And by learning this, it has to kind of get an intuition of, if there's a body without a head, then I better put a head there. Or if I see a head and no body, then I have to restore the body. By training this model this way, you can use a lot of data and the model gets quite powerful. It has been shown that these self-supervised learning techniques are really good to have a model that is a good starting point to later solve other tasks.
Well, sticking to theory for a little bit longer, do you think that we're going to converge on maybe one standard sets of ways of doing things, or will it turn out to be that perhaps for primate study you use algorithm A, and for cancer analysis you use algorithm B? Are we all going to adopt the same methodologies or develop our own?
It's a good time to ask these questions, like especially like with tools like ChatGPT or also other foundation models that are coming out now that basically have seen so much diverse data that they are able to do seemingly anything. I still think that some of the challenges, or most of the challenges, if you want to solve them really well, you still need tailored models to do this. It is these foundation models, so models that have been trained on so large scale data sets that they can do almost anything. They are definitely a good starting point, but I still have not seen, like, for example, we have tried ChatGPT with vision to analyze our videos for us, and it has failed quite a bit. They are still far away from solving everything, but it is a trend that is going in this direction, that now there are these models that are applicable in a lot of diverse tasks.
Could you expand on that failure? In what way do LLMs fail to help?
Yeah, we took the videos that we have of our macaques that are looking at other macaques, or also of the lemurs that are interacting with those boxes, and we asked it first of all to describe the scene. There it is quite good. So it can detect, okay, there's a forest, there are animals. Sometimes it can detect which animals there are. But then when we get to, because we want to analyze those videos, so we basically need some sort of structured output to say, okay, what is happening in this scene, so that later we can run regression models, for example, to say, are they doing social learning, or what biases are there in terms of, are they looking more at older individuals, are they looking more at individuals that are higher in the hierarchy? So a description of the scene is quite nice, but it is not enough for us to do behavioral analysis. So then when we ask to give us a little bit of a more structured output, for example, to give us a triplet of who is doing what towards whom, like for example, a subject looking at object, then it just came up with a lot of things that were not there. It also didn't see many things that were actually happening. So it was just, I think it was probably an output that was too far away from what it has done before, and maybe also a task that it has not done in that way before.
So a video is an ordered set of individual images. Is it enough to break it down that way and treat each image as an independent problem to be solved or some recognition task to be done on it? Do I need to consider the whole video?
Currently, most methods are doing it that way that you just described. So for example, if you think of a multi-object tracking, multi-animal tracking, those methods, they cut the video into slices, they apply an object detector, like for example YOLO, on each one of those frames. They detect all the lemurs, and then they find some way to associate them to say, okay, this is the same lemur as this lemur because it was detected in the same location one frame later. And similar it is also for interaction recognition models, like for example scene graphs, where also you basically do it on every individual frame and then somehow consolidate this information again in the output. However, we think that it is not enough, because these methods, they come to their limit relatively quickly, and sometimes you definitely need the temporal input also to determine the behavior. Like for example, if we have the macaques, a look is defined as a monkey that is moving the head in the direction of the target, and that you cannot detect on single frame. So there you definitely need a video. If we think of more complex tasks like interactions or also spatiotemporal action localization, then we have to get as much information as possible, and a lot of this information is not in the single frames, but it is actually in the whole sequence. So it is best to use models that process videos completely and let all those things that are happening throughout the video sequence interact with each other in order to give like a better output.
Well, getting more on the engineering side, could you describe what your toolbox looks like today? What are some of the core libraries or software solutions that you make use of?
We're developing the methods, and we're working also with other people's code bases, mostly with Python, almost exclusively with Python actually. And we are using PyTorch to train and develop those deep learning models. I think that is kind of a small toolbox, but quite powerful. And personally, I do most of my visualizations and analysis later with R, but you can also do that in Python. And I think, for example, scikit-learn is a great toolbox there to do machine learning or also train other models, like if you need a linear regression or anything.
Well, anyone interested in computer vision knows about the ImageNet dataset, which has lots of common human everyday objects and scenes and things like that. I'm not sure if there are any lemurs in that dataset at all. Are there any popular or famous datasets that you can leverage in your work?
Actually, I'm also not sure if there are lemurs in ImageNet. If I had to guess, I would say no. But I'm sometimes I'm surprised by like what object classes, because there are 1,000 object classes in ImageNet, and sometimes it's surprising what you find in there. I would say no lemurs, but there are definitely datasets released that can be used to kind of pre-train our models. I'm not aware of any large scale, for example, I don't know, lemur tracking datasets or lemur action understanding datasets, but it definitely helps to train a model with something that is more similar than a lemur, like for example, other non-human primates, rather than, for example, training it with a human dataset where that is very different to the lemur. So I think especially if you want to train models that are working with chimpanzees and macaques, there are now already so many labeled data sets, also video data sets out there, that you can definitely use them as a starting point for your model. And we are also exploring, like, for example, how well it works to pre-train on a big macaque data set, and then retrain just on a small portion of our lemur data in order to get a better data set. And we're comparing, for example, macaque pre-training with ImageNet pre-training and see how much that helps. Although we have very preliminary results and it's not published yet.
Interesting idea, though. Yeah. Do you have any other words of wisdom along those lines? Tools and tricks and tips you found helpful along the way?
Yeah, there are definitely some ideas and some data sets that you can use. For example, there's the macaque pose data set, where you have a lot of images of macaques, pictures of macaques in zoos. And this data set has been labeled with segmentation masks. So somebody went and said, okay, this is the pixel precise mask of this monkey. And we can make use of that, because if we train the model with only the data from the macaque pose dataset, the model will learn pixel combinations. So it will be very good at detecting macaques in zoos or in front of brown and gray backgrounds. But it's not so good if we want to use it to detect macaques in the forest, which is green. So what we can do is we can just cut out and copy paste these segmentation masks onto green backgrounds or onto diverse backgrounds. So for example, ImageNet backgrounds, these are very diverse, and we can train the model to detect the macaques there. And we did that also and compared like macaque pose with this macaque copy paste dataset that we created. And we saw that this macaque copy paste dataset is much better to detect macaques in the forest than a macaque pose. Of course, macaque pose is also good, but you can improve your performance by just doing this simple copy paste trick and get more diverse images.
Well, earlier you were mentioning working in both Python and R. Can you share the pitch for R? What makes it an appealing language for your work?
I'm personally a big fan of R. I've used R on my previous job, and if I can choose, I always choose R for doing data analysis. I think Python is, of course, much more advanced in terms of anything related to deep learning. So if you want to do computer vision, if you want to do deep learning, then I think Python is the way to go. For me personally, I think R is ahead of Python when it comes to data visualization, but it might also be that it's just because I've used it so much that I'm more comfortable with it. So I also know people who use Python and do really, really great visualizations. I do like that R basically never crashes or anything. It's very easy to set it up. It's easy to install packages and everything. With this central repository, they have a great support. For example, R Studio as an IDE. I do also like the R community quite a lot. They are very helpful. Like if you have a question, there's always somebody who can jump in and give you an idea how to solve it. I think even though the learning curve in the beginning might be a little bit easier for Python, I think especially when it comes to the tidyverse in R, it's something that if you learn it, it's quite beneficial. And for me, it makes programming, and it's not programming, but data analysis much easier and more intuitive. Yeah, and finally, of course, anything that has to do with statistics. R was originally a statistics language, so it has a lot of like tests or simple models or also more complex models. Anything that you want to do in statistics is probably somewhere in R, and it has a good quality to be used.
There are many good resources for R. One is your blog, our Vogg blog. We'll have a link to it in the show notes. For listeners who haven't visited yet, tell me what they're going to find there.
Oh yeah, it's quite not quite old, but a few years old right now already. But I had a lot of fun working with it, and that is another thing. Like I saw a lot of people having like small blogs in R, and they even had blog posts about how to make a blog. And so I said, oh, maybe I should do that too. I started in the beginning to do things about data visualization. So I was just participating in a weekly event that was called Tidy Tuesday, where there would be a data set posted, like something fun from everyday life, and everybody would just try to make one visualization, try to kind of get one cool thing out of that data set and post their visuals, and then people could comment or also look at the code and get ideas and get inspiration. Whenever I did something that I liked a lot, then I tried to make a small blog post and put it out there. But then later I also did things about data composition. I called it that way. That is basically if you quickly have to assemble a data set to do something. That was something that happened quite a lot, to explain a small task to somebody, or if you were waiting for data but you still had to wait a few weeks, but you could ask, okay, how does the data look more or less, like how many columns are there, how are these columns called? Then you would set up a data set, you could already work on the visual, and then in the end replace this created data with the real data and not lose time in the meantime. And the biggest thing that we did there was kind of to make a complete database of different tables and relational database that we used then for internal trainings in the company where I was working. Oh yeah, and the third thing is fuzzy string matching. That was also like kind of a side project that I had, that basically if you have a lot of similar names, like for example you have a survey and you ask people where do you work, and they put in different spellings of the same thing, like for example University of Göttingen, or some people might put University Göttingen, or some write it with uppercase lowercase letters and some have typos in them. What are methods that you can use to match them to the same entity? Yeah, that's kind of what our Vogg blog is about. I hope someday there will be new topics, maybe about monkeys. We will see.
Looking forward to it. Well, Richard, what's next for you?
I still have a year or year and a half with this project. Yeah, we still have a few challenges that we have to solve, like especially when it comes to interaction understanding, when it comes to calibrating the cameras so that they also, if I see a monkey on one camera, that the other camera also knows that this is this particular individual. So I still have a few ideas that I want to try out. And after that, I'm not sure. I do see myself a little bit more in industry, but I don't know for sure. So this is also what I said before starting the PhD. And I always say, if there's a cool project like this one, yeah, I'm the first one to be motivated and jump onto it. And so we will see what what comes up next. I think anything where I can use data science, where I can also use deep learning, computer vision potentially to solve some real world problems, I'm happy to do that.
And is there anywhere listeners can follow you online?
Probably the best place is Twitter or X. So it's Richard Vogg with a underscore in between.
Sounds good. We'll have a link in the show notes for listeners to follow up on. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your work.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really cool experience.